Hey, everybody. Welcome to this broadcast. Mark DeJesus here, looking forward to sharing with you today. Going to continue on some series and material on the subject of OCD. But I just feel like what I'm sharing here is stuff that everybody can benefit from. So welcome those of you that are in the live stream, or those of you that are tuning in later on and referencing this as a resource, want to speak to your hearts. Mark DeJesus here, and it is my passion to help equip, encourage, and support believers to live healed and free from the inside out. And I want to walk alongside as your brother in Christ. And I want to navigate through issues that we face and that we struggle with and help bring encouragement. And out of my journey of OCD and what God has done in my life and help me to learn firsthand, I'm going to talk to you about the subject of OCD. Not from the distance, not from some like, here I am on this lofty tower speaking down to you, but as your brother who's been through it and knows what it's like and knows what these struggles feel like, know what these battles are like. So I've been in the midst of sharing some things that I find are important. And what I'm doing right now is a series on distortions. And there's 7 of them that I'm going to get through. And today's important because where OCD gets tripped up big time is the meaning and the interpretation of the thoughts you have. This is huge. I think, though, the body of Christ in general could benefit from what I'm sharing today. I have a very strong conviction on that. You know, we get into these subjects and we go, oh, that's mental health. That's this category over here. And I like to take these subjects that we put over here and bring them out into the collective thinking and go, you may not be diagnosed or wherever you are in that, but you can benefit. And see, I found when I was pastoring, I would teach on subjects like anxiety or depression or whatever. And I felt like the whole congregation, everyone there would like, yeah, I may not have it as intensely as maybe that person or the way you're describing it, but I get what you're saying. So I think we can all benefit from this. But if you're in a place where you struggle with it or helping someone or anywhere in between, we are covering some important aspects. And in the first distortion, you definitely want to get that. And I'll get to that in just a second. But if you want to join my mailing list where you get updates on any resource I put out covering OCD, which I'm spending a great amount of time talking on, teaching on, sharing on, go to markdejesus.com, type that in, and then type /OCD help. And you'll see a little thing, mailing list. I'm not going to bug you, but there's going to be a few automated emails that are going to come to you. Some of them will ask you for your feedback. I'd like to hear your story. Some of them I may feature on my show. Now, if I do that, I'm going to remove your name. I'm going to remove personal information because I respect your privacy. But it would be awesome if some of them I could highlight and go, hey, here's stuff that a lot of people go through. Let's talk about it. But more than that, this will be the mailing list where specifically, anytime I talk about something OCD related, you are going to get an update on that. So take advantage of that. But I've been talking about distortions. And please, if this means anything to you or bears witness, go to my video on perfectionism, OCD and perfectionism, because that's the first one. Then I gave a heartfelt exhortation on the struggle with uncertainty. It's a major hook that makes us obsessive. We narrow in on these certain thoughts, and then we often follow a compulsion. What's the compulsion? It's the way we try to feel better. And the more you can recognize, here's my obsession, and here's typically where my compulsion leads me, that's actually good because then you're aware of the pattern you fall into. But today, I want to get into distorted meaning of thoughts. I'm going to say it in 2 ways. Meaning, interpretation. Okay? Those are kind of 2 ways, that 2 words I'm going to use, that this is where OCD gets challenging. And this is where sufferers get tied up the most, and it's where I found myself drowning. It's not so much the thought I get. It's the meaning and the interpretation that we have over things like the interpretation and meaning over the thought. The meaning and interpretation over the situation we find ourselves in, maybe in life or what we're going through, the feelings you're having. The meaning and interpretation you have over your struggles, right? the meaning and interpretation you have over your life. It's not so much what's coming into your mind, it's how you interpret it. And OCD sufferers have a very harsh, condemning, shaming interpreter. This is really, really important. Because it's not so much about the thoughts that come your way, because every thought that's out there will probably pass through your thinking. It's not so much that. It's how you interpret it that either allows the thought to float on by, I'm okay, or it halts it and magnifies it and says, I must pay attention to it. Now, I've not met one person so far who struggles with OCD issues that is not incredibly hard on themselves. So I know for a fact, part of the cluster of struggle is that OCD sufferers are very harsh in their thoughts towards themselves, condemning. There's a sense of contempt. That word contempt is a powerful word because it speaks of a bitter animosity, but it's someone looking down on someone else. And I find that when it comes to many of our thoughts, when they come in, it gets interpreted in a harsh way. We look down on ourselves with contempt. So you have an intrusive, unwanted thought. Maybe it's a crazy thought. Maybe it's a thought about harm. Maybe it's a sexual thought. Maybe it's a thought about your salvation. Maybe it's a thought about harming someone that you love. Or maybe what it does is the thought arrives and then you go, oh my goodness. You look at it and there's an intense, harsh meaning. And I find in life, now this isn't just an OCD statement, this is a life statement, is how we interpret our life is incredibly important. How we interpret our thoughts and what's coming down is so important. You see, all of us are going through hard times in various ways. You have things that are struggles. There's aspects of suffering people are going through. There's aspects of just difficulty. And if you interpret where you're at harshly, then you're going to feel disempowered. You're going to increase depression. You're going to increase feeling stuck. So I had to learn, I didn't know how to interpret my life, my situation, the meaning that I give to things. As you look around, the meaning that you give to things is everything. So someone could be in a financial struggle. The meaning they give to that, this is the end. I'm never going to make it through. This always happens to me and I'm forever going to be stuck, right? Two people could have the same financial struggle they're going through. The other one could go, it's okay. I'm going through something here. I'm not going to beat myself up. We'll figure it out one step at a time. See, the second meaning is empowering. And I like to encourage people that have OCD issues. You're going to have to learn how to find the empowered interpretation that's loving, that's kind, that's not condemning. Because what you'll find is most of those troubling thoughts that come your way, you beat the tar out of yourself. I mean, you just really, really get harsh. And so therefore it creates a really mean, distorted interpretation, and then you live out of that distorted interpretation. I have many people that come to me with scrupulosity, religious OCD, and they might say, well, I struggle to know if I've even saved. So they have an interpretation that goes, yeah, you're probably not. Oh my, and then they get scared, and then now they're trying to answer this question, and they're on these rabbit trails that God is not asking, that God is not saying. And they're going to God with these questions and they're struggling because they're not finding answers because they're following a distorted interpretation. When really, they probably just need to understand the unconditional love of God. They need to settle, and I don't need to fuss over these things. Jesus did something wonderful for me, but I can be loved right where I'm at right now. I don't have to perform for love. But instead, they follow those rabbit trails, right? Because of the distorted meaning and interpretation. So then, I'll talk about things like, well, what you really need to learn is unconditional love. And they go, I don't know how. And I go, well, exactly. That's why OCD happens. And they go, see, and I don't receive love. It shows I'm not saved. Ooh, there's your interpreter again. And what I want to do is I want to encourage you to fire the jerk of an interpreter that's inside your thinking. It's making you take yourself too seriously, take your thoughts too harshly. Because the reality is we all have intrusive and unwanted thoughts. Now, I know, many OCD sufferers go, no, it's different for us. Yes, I agree. But see, one of the problems we have is you think you're the only one with this battle. You're alone and shame on you and no one else has this. And I found it may not be at OCD levels, but I found other people had very similar thought struggles, and they had shame in it because they had unwanted thoughts. We all have disturbing, unwanted, intrusive thoughts that create anxiety, create guilt. But for someone with OCD, these thoughts are interpreted so harshly and so intensely. And usually what's involved is condemning, accusatory, shaming. It's like there's an abuser inside that's an interpreter. And we're so used to it, we assume it's right. And that's the struggle. That's the struggle in freedom, is that I, as a support system and people I talk to, go, I can't force you to let go of your interpreter. And if you defend your interpreter, how am I going to help? No, I really need to think about this. No, is you're starting from a premise based on condemnation, accusation, guilt, shame. And God's not in any of that. He's working faith, hope, and love, building up your faith, building up your sense of security, building your confidence, single-mindedness, one step in front of the other, your love today. You know, Paul the Apostle said in Romans 8, he said, man, the suffering that we have is not compared to the glory that's going to be revealed. And he said, I'm convinced nothing's going to separate me from the love of God. So in his trials, he actually discovered the love of God. In trials, OCD sufferers feel more separated from love. Did you catch that? Paul in his trials learned the depth of God's love. OCD sufferers in their trial feel separated from love. It's like they're drowning. And their feelings are off. Why are their feelings off? Because their interpreter is harsh, is mean. And so therefore they don't know how to even assess their feelings and emotions. They don't even know how to deal with them. So then when they even try to learn about love, they're like, well, I can't feel it. I don't sense anything. And then they interpret that again. They're always interpreting negative. Go here, go here, go here, go there, go there. And it always ends with, I am just a pile of garbage. Shame just covers everything. If you find any help in the things I share, you need to understand shame, because shame's going to distort your interpretation. Okay? So the key to all thoughts, key to life, is not so much what thoughts we have. You may have an unwanted thought or a troubling thought. That's not the problem. The problem is now the interpretation. So you have an unwanted sexual thought of whatever kind. The interpretation is, this must mean something. This must mean something. I need to pay attention to it. So therefore, and it means it's something about my character, and I'll get to that in just a second. I'm going to do separate videos on intrusive and unwanted thoughts as well, but this will kind of lay the foundation for some of that, okay? I'll give you a basic premise. The thought arrives, interpreter engages. The interpreter always goes negative, harsh, disempowering, accusatory, condemning, guilt, you name it, it falls. So a conclusion comes out of that. And so for a sexual unwanted thought, I must be a sexual deviant. All right? And it creates disturbance, guilt, anxiety, panic. Oh my, right? So then we try to scramble and find a way to relieve it. And that becomes your compulsion. And then it becomes a trap because you never truly feel free. But you're trying to relieve yourself of the conflict, confusion, anxiety, guilt, and all that kind of stuff. Okay? So that's like a basic premise. Let me go into it a little bit more detailed. So you have an intrusive, unwanted thought or some kind of question. Many times the thought is a question that you don't need to be addressing. Are you really in love? Are you really saved? Right? Remember I talked about in Distortion 2, creates that uncertainty. Well, now the interpreter is going to come in. And the interpreter is, yeah, you're not really saved. Yeah, you're not. And it creates this anxiety and guilt. And it's now leading you on all these tangents. Maybe you are a sexual deviant. Maybe you're not in love with this person. And it creates all this disturbance, right? It creates an emotional response. So it seems to come out of nowhere oftentimes. It's very sudden. And it has a strong emotional response it creates in you. Maybe it's video playback. It's so vivid. You feel it. So when you feel the thought, it's like, whoa, right? Because now you're feeling it. Now it's starting to seem like it's true. Like my interpreter is accurate. And every person who has, for example, religious OCD, how they interpret their thoughts as being God or not is way off. Now, when you recognize your interpreter's off, it positions you to relearn from scratch. It's been helpful for me to go, I don't know how to hear from God. It's okay. It's okay. I'll just start over. I'll just be like a child and start like a child, which is great because Jesus said, if you want to come into the kingdom, you got to be like a child. I just got to innocently learn. What does it mean to just rebuild my God filter of how I'm even hearing God? Because it was way off. Way off. I felt, whenever I felt this like ping in my stomach, oh, God must be getting my attention. I attributed God's voice to the loudest voice. I attributed God's voice to the one that seemed to create the greatest disturbance. Oh, God must be warning me about something. So for those of you, for example, that have these salvation OCD things about trusting God enough for salvation enough, you go by that feeling. Oh, this must mean something. And the interpreter comes in and go, yeah, you sinner headed for hell. You're deceived. Oh, you think you accepted Jesus? Did you? Did you really? You really didn't. And the feelings kind of line up with it, right? Now, the first thing is it creates a very strong emotional response. But the second thing I find too is that the thought tends to go against your value system. Did you hear me on that? So give me the thoughts that bug you the most. I will also show you it matches in values that are important to you. So if you're having these impure thoughts that keep coming to you, it's probably because you value purity so much, but it's not built on love and grace. It's built on performance and religious legalism. So any thought that represents anything against this is so highlighted disturbing, rather than going, it's all right, float on by. It's no big deal. Everybody has these. I don't have to pay attention to them. I'm okay. I'm loved today. Right? So it goes against your faith value, your salvation value, your purity value, being a good parent, right? Because you have some thought regarding your kids or where you're at in life, right? And so you have these distorted values within them. So it matches a value that it conflicts against. You want to be pure, but the thought's not pure. But your value's built on something that's not God's love and his nurture, because it's always accusing you. So you have these things of like, I need to make sure I do everything right. I got to do the right thing. I got to make sure all my thoughts are right. Because my thought doesn't seem right, I'm unloved. I got to deal with this now. So there's this strong feeling that says, I must pay attention to this thought. The very presence of this thought produces this emotional response. I got to pay attention to it. Why? Because the interpreter says there is a meaning I must find here. And ignoring this thought means you are ignoring a strong warning signal that must be paid attention to, right? And it's interesting because in my teaching, in my journey, I tell people there are symptoms in our life we face, and they're often signals that things of the heart need to be addressed, right? So, for example, you may have depression, you may have anxiety. Things of the heart need to be addressed rather than ignoring it. You know, sometimes we ignore the anxiety, we ignore, right? But for OCD sufferers, this concept is thrown off the rails. They feel that everything has a meaning. All these thoughts have meanings, and I must find them. So the interpretation and meaning is distorted, it's magnified, and it's always based on judgment, harsh judgment, condemning, and a lot of fear, and a lot of anxiety. Usually a lot of stuff like you're a terrible person. The thought carries weight to it because, again, it goes against that value system. This is wrong. But that this is wrong is not built on God's love and goodness and what Jesus did for you. It's built on like you making sure everything's right. So that inner value system has to like perfectionize everything. I'm making up a word. Where any flawed thinking has to be addressed. And really it reveals how you see yourself. That you don't know what it's like to just be unconditionally loved. To be loved where you're at. It's revealing that you need nurture. And so what we do is we hear the thought, we hear the meaning, and now we're on a rabbit trail. Meanwhile, God's over here and going, I want to heal your broken heart. I want to teach you what it means to be loved and nurtured. I want to teach you what it means to be loved, and you don't have to do a thing about any of those things. That's really where it gets tough and where the rubber meets the road. Because OCD sufferers are like drug addicts to the thoughts they obsess about. Drug addicts. And I'll talk about the addiction factor in our thinking in other videos. But like drug addicts, we chase these things. And when we detox and stop the compulsion and go, no, I'm loved. I don't have to serve that thought. I don't have to give meaning to it. It's just a thought, pass on by. I'm loved today. I'm okay. It's like a drug addict coming off of their high. And it's interesting because we don't feel like it's hard to admit that we're drug addicts to our thoughts, or even that label seems extreme. And we don't like to make that connection, but start disengaging from that thought, and you'll see the withdrawal symptoms rise in the form of anxiety. You don't think a cocaine addict has anxiety when they leave those thoughts? Now, see, my family has a history line of addictions in it. My father was a very, very intense drug addict. It's a big part of his story and journey. When he became a Christian, he got saved in a prison cell and had a history of addictions, severe heroin addict addictions, okay? And has never gone back to that. Now, I had to realize, though, that addiction pattern would often manifest in how I perceive thoughts and how I engage thoughts. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have drug addicts in your family line for that to happen, but there is an addict-like way where it's like we keep chasing this drama-filled thought. We hate it. We really don't want to engage it, but we keep chasing it. What does that sound like? A heroin addict. I don't want it. It's bad for me, but I keep chasing it. And I remember my dad telling me the story about when he went to prison. Obviously, you can't get heroin anymore. And he said that one of the first things they did was cut his hair. And he was having withdrawal symptoms so bad that when they were cutting his hair with scissors, he was like in a paranoia where he thought they were cutting his skin off. That's how much, and him and my mom worked in the Teen Challenge program, which is a Christian recovery program, where people would just literally sit in bed and they would just sit there and pray while they were withdrawing off the drugs so they could begin to teach them and help them in the ways of God. And for many OCD sufferers, that's what it's like, because they just want to serve the compulsion to try to feel better, and then they cycle and cycle and cycle and cycle. And when they break out of the obsession, break out of the compulsion and step back, it's like, oh, I've got to think on this, right? And what they really need to do is hang in there, because what they're going to learn is they're going to learn how to be loved. They're going to have to learn how to be loved. The thought's there, but they're not doing anything about it. I see you. I know what you're saying, but I'm not feeding you anymore because I'm loved. Because if I fight you and go, no thought, no thought, it's going to make it worse. If I try to argue with thought, it's going to make it worse. If I try to go find answers from somebody else, they might make me feel better for a minute, but then I'll keep going to them and it'll be my reassurance. And I'll be addicted to doing that. Some religious OCD sufferers, they're addicted to sermons. They listen to sermons all the time, and it's their compulsion. And it's kind of tough to admit that, right? That the thing that we would culturally go is wonderful is actually their thing that they do, that they actually need to probably detox from their sermon listening, because they've heard enough sermons to be blue in the face, and the more they listen to them, the more it triggers. Or they research. They get online, they research the topic, right? Or they ask their circle of friends or mentors, and if they don't understand OCD, they'll keep feeding the reassurance. Reassure me. This thought's crazy, but I'm okay, right? This thought's crazy, I'm okay, right? And eventually we have to come to terms that we have to let go of our compulsion to fix the thought and learn how to be loved in the midst of the thought. And that's really the definition of unconditional love. Learning that I am loved in the midst of the presence of something that disturbs me and will seek to disqualify me from being loved. Is this making sense? Is this landing? To me, your comments are encouraging. It's great. This is so important. And see, I feel like this is more than just OCD. This goes beyond. This is like communicating to our world how we're dealing with our inner life, because it starts with compassion. Every time you're in a struggle, your first step should be compassion. Compassion over yourself, acknowledging the love that God has for you. Because out of that distorted interpretation in our thoughts, right? That distorted meaning, guilt and fear rise. And shame is right behind them, shoving them, pushing them, keeping you in that place. How could you have this thought? How could you even think this way? What kind of Christian are you? Right? And when I hear this, I go, gunk, 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 gunk. Where they go, what are you doing? I go, oh, I'm just acting out what you're doing to yourself. Beating myself over the head with something. Right? Because when we expose the interpreter, we start to realize that we need to fire him. I remember when I would speak in other countries, I've done missions trips to a bunch of different countries, and a few of them didn't speak English. Now, my last name is De Jesus. I'm half Puerto Rican, but I'm also half Scandinavian, Norwegian with some Swedish, okay? So I got an interesting mix. So many people assume, they hear my last name, oh, Mark De Jesus. And they start speaking Spanish, right? And I'm like, I don't speak Spanish. I know. And many of them are like so disappointed. How can you say that, with your name De Jesus? But anyways, I've spoken in other countries, and I remember I can hear the language and I kind of know some of what they're saying, but I couldn't speak it and give it justice. But when I would speak, like I would taken trips to Guatemala, to Peru, spoken in many, many churches and stuff. And when you speak, you got to get used to speaking where you say a sentence, pause. You got to let the interpreter go, right? But there was times where when I didn't do anything about it, but it's times when I was speaking, I go, he didn't interpret what I just said. I can tell. I don't know, but I know enough to know the interpreter didn't really say it the way I said it. He got stuck and just kind of changed the sentence, right? Or I would want to bring my words down more. But in many of the churches, the culture, the preachers would do a lot of preaching out of yelling, right? So they take what I say and try to give it a little more zest. I'm like, no, I wanted to bring that one down. This is a more like, So what's the key? Because sometimes I would get done and there was a slight frustration. I was honored to speak, slight frustration. I'm not sure the interpretation always landed. And see, this isn't about getting your interpretation perfect. I need to know what this thought means in the perfect way. Nope. It's about saturating everything you're hearing in the love that God has for you. Because when compassion's there, it puts things into perspective. Being compassionate over yourself. Unconditional loving acceptance. So otherwise, now you get confused regarding your motive. Because the interpreter's harsh, and then you think like, oh no, they accuse me of my motives, so now I feel disturbed and anxious, and maybe this is for me. This is out of my heart. Maybe I want this. Maybe I want this. It's a classic OCD statement. Maybe I want this. Maybe I don't love God. Maybe I'm just a deviant. Maybe I'm just an unholy person, right? Here's a big trap. I must have this thought for a reason. That's what I used to think. I must have a thought for a reason. So then what it leads to is unproductive introspection. Let me look and discover. I got to figure this out. What is it, right? I'll get to that more in just a second. Then what happens is we have this really unhealthy link that I want to disengage for you. It's an unhealthy link. Are you ready? I'll give you the psychological term. You can look it up for yourself, okay? Again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not your psychologist. I'm not trying to diagnose you. I'm not replacing any medical treatment or any psychological or therapy, blah, blah, blah. You get it, okay? I'm your brother, just talking. So if anything I say doesn't make sense or doesn't help, just throw it out. Don't worry about it, okay? Or just put it on the shelf and let it come back around. But here's the psychological term, thought-action fusion. Thought-action fusion, and it means this. It's like having a thought is the same as acting on it. Why? Because the thought carries a very heavy feeling to it. And so you feel like you're capable of doing it, which scares you. You may wonder, you start to think, I am capable of doing this. You're afraid you might do it. In some cases, you wonder if you've already done it. Did I hit somebody with my car and not even know it? Right? And the interpreter's going, you better look out, better think. Or you go back and check, did I run someone over? I should probably check. I may have. Maybe you ask someone, I think I may have run someone over. And they go, oh my goodness, you ran someone over? And then you're like, oh my goodness, maybe I did run. See how it gets off the rails quick. Especially if people don't understand you have OCD issues. If they do, they might be able to filter what you're saying and be helpful. Hey, calm down. It's all right. And then, but if they keep doing that, they'll just be your reassurance. See, we have to start coming under a new interpreter ourselves. Okay, so thought action fusion is having a thought is the same as acting on it. Now, this gets tricky in Christianity. I'm going to be honest with you. It does. It gets tricky because those raised in Christianity have thought action fusion a lot, right? Now, Jesus spoke of, committing adultery, but then if you have a thought, you've already committed it in your heart. An OCD sufferer doesn't understand what that looks like. Because what Jesus is saying is, you're thinking on the adultery, you're meditating on it, you're going through with it, and you're thinking. He's like, you're already committing adultery because you're living it out within here, right? An OCD sufferer thinks if they have the thought, they committed adultery. Any thought. They see a married woman and they're attracted. Or you're a female, you see a married man. Or you're around someone of the same sex. And the interpreter just takes it and magnifies it. And this is creating a lot of problems relationally because people feel so uncomfortable talking to people, opposite sex or even same sex, because we're so confused. And when it gets into sexuality in those avenues, a lot of it too goes back to our sexuality was not nurtured and taught. I ask people, growing up, how'd you learn about your sexuality? You'll say, well, pornography magazine. Walking down the street, a bunch of guys whistled at me, some ladies will say. And it awakened to, they pay attention to my appearance, right? It's not usually, at home, mom and dad, we talked, we had conversations. During the puberty years, we had conversations, worked through it. They might say, well, there's this one time we sat down with a book. And it was this awkward moment, right? And everyone was afraid to talk, right? One of the most important subjects, our identity in who we are as men and women, and then our sexuality, right? So no wonder we get these disturbing thoughts and it throws us off so bad we become panicked over it because the interpreter comes out of our training. And most people, especially OCD sufferers, you haven't had any equipping. And I'm saying that to you as your brother in Christ, it's okay. When you have zero references on how to deal with thoughts and you're just left to yourself, you're going to lean towards the negative. And many just wonderful-hearted people that you just want to do what's right, but these thoughts accuse you to yourself. And you spin and you spin and you spin. And so a lot of times, we take this thought in your heart kind of thing way out of proportion because first you think, well, the thought originated from me. And that's just not true. We can have a thought from God. We can have a thought from the enemy. A whole army we fight against, spiritual warfare, battles, right? You can have a thought that, gets triggered by something you were taught believing growing up. Long-term memory, belief systems. Now this OCD thing is taking that distorted thought. Right? You may have grew up in church legalism. And so now this thought fusion grabs onto that and now questions your salvation, questions your holiness, questions if God is going to even, receive you and accept you, whether you're going to heaven or not. So then here's the thing. And I get a lot of emails from people with scriptures. What about this scripture? What about that scripture? And it's like every single time their interpretations are way out of context. It's like, okay, we got to take a step back. But I'm not going to sit here and argue with you about a scripture, right? Because I will, I'll do some Q&As where we'll address those. But it's like, I address this scripture, and it's like, then you're over here with this scripture. And we address that, and then you're over here with this scripture, right? You read the letters of God in a filter that is distorted. So then what happens is Christians, then they get into this introspection and they investigate why this thought even appeared. And if you believe like in spiritual warfare, which I do, you go, oh my goodness, this is generational. This is generational. Maybe it's generational. So maybe my father, my mother did this to my bad, maybe somebody, what is it? Then you're investigating. And meanwhile, you just need to let the thought pass on by. You don't need to give meaning to it. Or here's one. Tell me if you've followed. You don't have to write on this, but just answer out loud wherever you're at. Hopefully you're by yourself if you say it out loud. But like, you ever had a thought pattern you struggle with that's intrusive, and you go, maybe I was traumatized and I don't know it. Dun dun. Right? I'm laughing because I've been there. You've been there. No. Maybe something happened to me and I don't know. So now you're investigating. You're investigating stuff you don't need to investigate. Because healthy trauma is like, I just need to be open. If I'm aware of a trauma, I'll discover it when I need to, because a lot of damage can be done with searching for a trauma that seems nebulous, but you come to the conclusion it must be because of that. I had that happen in my life. Oh, I have this thought pattern because something must have happened to me. What was it? You think something happened to me? Maybe something happened. And then you're like, I don't know, maybe. Oh yeah, you did. I think they're thinking I am, right? Keeps my cycle going. You look for things that could have happened or look for reasons. You want to find a conclusion instead of just nurturing yourself that it's okay. You're at a heightened sensitivity to thought patterns. Stuff sticks to you real easily. Okay? Shame comes in, interprets it harsh, says motives are bad, beats you up over it. And you think because you had the thought means you basically did it, you're capable of it, you might have already done it, right? The Bible makes a distinction between thoughts, talks about taking thoughts captive, right? It's thoughts that come and arrive. There are many thoughts that come to us. There's the arena of temptation. There's thoughts that are genuine places that we struggle. For the OCD sufferer, though, the temptation is not whatever the theme is. The temptation is to obsess over it. See, you think your temptation is the thought. People have these intrusive sexual thoughts. Oh, me, I have this lust. You just have an obsession over the intrusive thought. You're afraid of it. And because you're afraid of it too, it heightens it even more. Right? And so there's a difference between just a thought arriving, actual temptation, and actual committing sin or engaging with sin. OCD minds don't know how to separate that out. They put it all with sin. Put it all with, this is from me, I'm capable of it, or I've already done it, or I could do it at any moment. And so you condemn yourself. What does the word condemn mean? It means to accuse as guilty with punishment. And that's where most people end up. I had this thought, it means I could do it, I'm going to go to jail. Like literal jail. I have this thought, it means this, it means that I agree with it, I'm going to hell. I have this thought, it means this, I'm going to lose my job or whatever. Right? And so here's the encouragement that I want to give to you for application. Okay, I'm going to land this and just let it be an encouragement to your life. Please share this and share this with other people so they can be encouraged in their own little journey. I'm going to give you some basic application because I'm going to just keep doing more and more content and just keep sweeping the rake over the coals of this and let God reveal to you what needs to reveal. But here's the thing I want you to emphasize. You can't control the thoughts that arrive in your thinking. I want you to just sit on that for just a second. Okay? I want you to just think about that. Because in Christianity, I think there's a distortion that we can control everything that comes in. Now, I want to empower you. You can control about where your compass is moving and where your focus is heading. Like what I'm going to focus my attention on. So I have an intrusive thought. I'm going to gently refocus my attention on love, I'm safe, and really on something else. Gently, always gently. If you do it harsh, you're going to feel that harshness and you're going to easily jump back. Just gentle. Love is patient, love is kind. So engage the power of love. And every OCD person I've ever talked to, interacted with, has a deficit, has a compromised place in their heart where they're lacking love. And people ask me, well, is it because their parents were bad? Is it this? Don't make it so black and white. Don't make assessment of people black and white. Many parents are like shaming themselves because their kids have OCD and they're like, oh, it's me, I'm a bad parent. I thought I loved him. It's not always that like black and white. Now, our parental grid, yeah, because all parents mess up. We all do. You know, the good news is we can talk to our kids and go, hey, I don't think I handled that the right way. I'm growing and learning, and that brings about great healing. But two, many parents say, well, we love our child. Well, have you equipped your child in learning how to be loved and receive love? Are you helping them to express what they're feeling freely, to even know what they're feeling, right? But see, the moment shame comes in, you beat yourself up, it disempowers. So you can't control what thoughts appear to you. You can control your focus. What you can do is go, God, I need to work on my response. And your response needs to be kindness. And your response needs to be, not every thought has to have this intensified meaning. And you usually know by that anxiety, that guilt trigger, and recognize, hey, my filter is distorted. My beliefs about my beliefs are distorted. My interpretation, my meaning is off. Because if you admit that, you won't defend it. Otherwise, you're going to keep going, I had this thought, I must not be. And you'll tell that to other people and try to find and figure it out. And you're going to do all this searching, which is just really compulsion. And really what you need to do is go, it doesn't have to mean anything. God, I'm loved. I'm okay. Some of us go to other people with our interpretation, right? And that can be a trap. So you say, can a Christian lose their salvation, right? Big theological topic, right? People have been arguing about it for hundreds of years, right? How many people's lives are encouraged and strengthened because of these theological arguments we have, right? But anyways, that's a whole nother subject, right? We go to somebody and they open the Bible, right? But what they may not realize is this is an OCD thing. So you're going with your compulsion. They may help for a moment, and it comes back later, right? Because we're not getting to the root issue. And the root issue is unconditional love in the midst of your struggles. So let yourself be taught. I don't know how to be loved. Okay, start learning. And let that be your focus. Day in, day out, learning to be loved. I made the drug addict comparison. Do you know that drug addicts, I could say sex addicts in general, they have something in common. There's a deficit of love. Now, when addiction comes in, what it does is it compromises love. It creates, love is a high. I've got to feel something. Love is a balancer. It grounds us. You have ups, you have downs, but you just get balanced out. And that's what love does. It's like, it's okay. I had a terrible day today, but it's okay. I had a great day. It's great. Had a rough day. It's all right. Love balances, grounds you. I love the word grounded. It's one of my favorite words. You be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that bring forth fruit in its season, right? And so the obsession is always that getting triggered by the drama. We can't stand it, but we run to it every time. And so we got to learn to detox it, to redirect to a new thing. And part of it is, I don't know how to interpret. My interpreter's off. So I'm firing the interpreter. And I don't know right now, and I'm learning, but I'm going to interpret everything through kindness right now. That's where we start. Kindness. It's all about his kindness. Start to treat yourself in total, unconditional, loving acceptance. Look at where you're at and say, what would kindness say? I just had this crazy thought, Mark. What would kindness respond to in that? Would it go, you're crazy, and you're crazy for having this thought, and what's the matter with you, and why are you thinking that way, and stop thinking that way? Why am I yelling? Or would it be, it's all right, we all have struggles. We all have struggles in these areas, if not this area, other areas, right? Don't argue over the thought, but invite compassion now to be your interpreter. Sometimes you just do absolutely nothing about the thought. Let yourself be loved in the presence of this nagging argument, because you're firing the interpreter. Fire the interpreter. Fire the interpreter. I fired him. I said, sorry, and you're not getting any severance pay. I'm inviting in a new interpreter: faith, hope, and love. Power, love, sound mind. Is this thought leading me into power, soundness, greater peace? If not, put it by the wayside. Peace. Peace I give you, Jesus said, right? God even said in his word, he's not the author of confusion. I'm in confusion right now, Mark. Okay, so let's dump the whole thing. Reset, reboot. It's not that easy, right? Because you're detoxing. Getting out. You're getting out of arguments and thoughts. God goes, I don't even know. And I think that's some of the frustration people have. They're asking God questions he's not asking. Right? So, like, let's say something happens to you. You have some accident or something. Maybe you get in some situation where somebody hurts you or harms you. They punch you, right? Punch you and they knock you out. And then you ask God, God, why did you do this to me? And then you're like, God didn't answer me. Because the question started off on the basis of a lie. So when we're dealing with these obsessive, intrusive thoughts, our interpreter lies to us. So then we ask God about it, and we're starting with a lie. So we go, oh God, why am I a sexual deviant? And God's like, so you see what I'm saying? So we need to shift. How can I learn to be loved in a greater way? How can I learn to be at peace in the midst of this and build the peace and redirect myself from anxiety to peace and learn to build my peace muscles? Because many of you, your anxiety triggers they're just really ingrained pathways, right? Learn to receive God's unconditional love. I appreciate even Paul the Apostle said this. He said, mercy triumphs over judgment. And see, what we do is we judge ourselves. And God goes, you can judge yourself and it feels like it's accurate. He's like, but mercy triumphs over it. Mercy is God's compassion over you in your suffering and in your struggle. So whatever thought thing you've got going on, mercy comes in and goes, it's all right. We're walking day by day. You're loved. You're loved. Judgment goes, how dare you even have this thought? How dare you, right? I feel mean just even acting that out. I feel mean even just talking like that, right? Like I just want to stop because I go, that's so harsh, Mark. Why are you even, right? But that's what goes on in here. Mercy triumphs. God says that triumphs. It wins. I see you through mercy, and it always trumps the judgment. But we have to see that. And we have to allow ourselves. It's not about getting your thoughts better, and then you'll be loved. It's about being loved right now. Just making sense. I pray you guys are encouraged. That's my number one goal for you is I want you to sense grace, kindness, nurture. Yeah, somebody said something about ripping people's security away. Yeah, sometimes Christians can do that to damage to others. Are you sure of your salvation? Are you sure? Are you sure? Do you know that if I keep doing that to you, we have there's an aspect to our thinking that if it gets repeated enough, we'll start to believe it. It's like they talk about this phenomenon where somebody who's brought in for interrogation over a crime, they didn't commit it, but they keep getting asked, getting asked, and they go, maybe I did do it. And so now they're starting to respond out of something that they didn't do. It explains OCD really well. And so then people around are like, oh, we don't know how to help. Because you're like, I think I murdered someone, right? I know I'm being extreme in this, but it kind of helps understanding. And deep inside, it's our love issues. It's nurture. It's rejection, shame, all that stuff that we weren't equipped in. And if you have religious OCD, tag along with that. Somewhere in your journey, You had a religious, legalistic, pharisaical, maybe even abusive, harsh, judgmental, condemning, the list goes on, somewhere in there, harsh yoke put on you. So even when we talk about the things of God, boom, that yoke is there. So you're asking me out of a heavy yoke. And what I'm saying is get the yoke off. But you're like asking out of this yoke, but Mark, and I go to take the whole yoke off, right? It's like the way I illustrated the whack-a-mole, dunk, dunk, dunk. Mark, what do I dunk, 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 do? Dunk, 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 dunk. And I go behind the machine, I just unplug it. And you go, wait, what just happened? Love, nurture, grace, mercy. Love, nurture, grace, mercy. Love, nurture, grace, mercy. That's what it's all about. Healing your broken heart, healing your empty heart, healing your unnurtured heart. And people ask, well, about my upbringing, I wasn't beat up as a kid. It's not about beating up your parents, And it's not about just like looking for traumas. Here's the key. Here's the problem. We were not equipped. Because I can ask people about their father and mother wounds. Most people can bring them to the surface. Not all, but many can. But then there's some that's like, I don't know, they dismiss the pain of their upbringing or the things that they struggled with. All right? But then here's the question. This is the home run question. Did your parents equip you to emotionally live in a full spectrum of emotions and thoughts in a healthy way as an adult to live as an overcomer? And that, I need to get a crickets button. I'm going to put a crickets button in so that I can hit the crickets. Because that's really the place. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean you bash your parents. It doesn't mean you beat them up. It's just recognition. And it says, I need to be equipped. So I prayed, Father, I don't know you as a father. But would you show me? Because that's all I'm going to learn right now. And that's my only subject. Oh, crazy thought. I'm learning. I see you thought, but I'm learning about what a good father is. Oh, but maybe you're not saved, and maybe or crazy thought, or this relationship thing. Oh, anxiety. No, I'm here. So, OCD people have to learn to stay on topic. Wherever get back on topic. What's your topic? Love. Learning to be loved by your Father in heaven, loving yourself, being kind to yourself. Nurturing the waters. Be still and know that I'm God. And I'm with you. I'll never leave you, forsake you. My thoughts towards you are not to harm you. I'm not here to kill you. But that's going to take time to relearn. Somebody said 99.9 of us were not equipped. Thank you. The 0.1 that were, they're Martians. They walk around. You might be able to see them. You might be able to pick them out of a crowd because you go, oh, man, yeah, there's somebody who's equipped. They're not fussing like the rest of us are. These thoughts I'm having, right? Equipped. So, Mark, how should someone that's 18 and still in school deal with all this because it's messing me up with my grades because I can't sleep at night, constantly obsessing over thoughts? No matter whether you're 18, 16, 40, 70, it's all the same. What does it look like for you to be loved by God in the midst of where you're going through? That's your journey. Loving yourself, that you don't have to serve that thought anymore. You don't, and fire the interpreter. How many of you are firing your interpreter today? Put it in the comments. I'm firing my interpreter. Firing him. Don't give a severance package. Don't sit down and have a meeting. Just say you're fired. Just fire him, right? Because appreciate you guys. I'm firing my interpreter. Well done. So fired. Well done. Well done. Welcome the interpreter of kindness. Because God is so big that he knows how to meet you, even in your struggle, your sin, your battles, your strongholds, your broken areas, all your weaknesses, he's there. This is how powerful the cross is. Emmanuel, God with us in the midst of your goofy thoughts. And laugh at some of those goofy thoughts. That get you troubled and creating guy. Laugh at them a little bit. Get a reprogram response that you chuckle so you don't take yourself so seriously. So thank you for being so encouraging and so positive. If these resources are a blessing, go to markdehesus.com, support this. I got some more of these I'm going to be doing on distorted thoughts, and I'll get into specifics. My wife and I are going to be launching our podcast series mañana, and we're looking forward to getting into some more. I think we're going to do some stuff on mental health, and we're kind of like putting together some of our thoughts. We're looking forward to that. If the father thing connected, experiencing God's love as your father, for rejection issues, you're like, yep, I get that. I want to let God heal the rejection mindset. There's that. If you aren't equipped to deal with anxiety, I Will Not Fear is a good start. Just kind of help you to understand how to separate these thoughts out and begin to get a newer lens. If that self-love thing and loving yourself, I'd encourage God Loves Me and I Love Myself. I also dive into that in my book, The Heart Healing Journey. So lots of resources here, lots of stuff you can dive into that's going to direct you into the helpful pathways. I pray you guys feel loved and connect to the grace that's in my heart. Love you all very much. I look forward to future episodes.